Bear by Marian Engel, published in 1976, stands as perhaps the most controversial, darkest, and forbidden book in Canadian literature. The story follows Lou, a lonely librarian who develops a sexual relationship with a bear while cataloging a private library on a remote island. This darkest and forbidden book explores themes of isolation, sexual frustration, and the complete breakdown of human boundaries through explicit scenes between Lou and the bear. Engel presents the relationship as both liberation and psychological collapse, with Lou finding fulfillment through acts that violate fundamental human taboos. The book was placed on Germany's Index of Forbidden Media, effectively banning its distribution due to its explicit depiction of bestiality. Despite winning Canada's Governor General's Literary Award, this darkest and forbidden book remains highly controversial for its graphic portrayal of human-animal sexual contact and its suggestion that such relationships might represent authentic connection. I Love My Mom by Zhu Dan, published in China before being banned there, tells the story of a paralyzed son and his devoted mother whose caregiving relationship crosses into incestuous territory. This darkest and forbidden book presents a scenario where maternal love becomes twisted into sexual dependency through years of isolation and physical intimacy. The mother, who has sacrificed everything for her disabled son, gradually transgresses normal boundaries as his physical needs mature into adult desires. The book was banned in mainland China for its explicit depiction of incest and its disturbing portrayal of how caregiving can become exploitative. This darkest and forbidden book challenges readers with its suggestion that love and abuse can become indistinguishable when people are completely isolated from society and normal human relationships. The Black Farm by Elias Witherow, published in 2017, depicts a nightmarish afterlife where suicide victims are condemned to eternal torture and repeated death. This darkest and forbidden book follows Nick and Jess, a couple who take their own lives, only to awaken in a realm of endless suffering, ruled by a monstrous entity called the Pig. The book features graphic descriptions of torture, sexual violence, and psychological torment as punishment for suicide. While not formally banned by any country, this darkest and forbidden book has faced content restrictions on multiple ebook platforms due to its extreme depictions of violence and its potentially harmful portrayal of suicide consequences. The book's horror lies in its suggestion that suicide leads not to peace, but to eternal, inescapable agony. Happy Ever After by Matt Shaw, published in 2013, presents one of the most psychologically disturbing scenarios in modern horror through the story of Peter, a delusional man who kidnaps Vanessa, believing he can force her to love him. This darkest and forbidden book alternates between Peter's twisted perspective, where he sees his actions as romantic gestures, and Vanessa's desperate attempts to survive through manipulation and false compliance. Shaw depicts graphic scenes of sexual violence, psychological torture, and captivity, while exploring how obsession can be mistaken for love. The book shows Peter's complete detachment from reality as he narrates acts of control and abuse as if they were courtship rituals. While not formally banned, this darkest and forbidden book has faced content restrictions on several platforms due to its explicit depiction of kidnapping, sexual assault, and Stockholm Syndrome dynamics. The horror lies in Shaw's unflinching portrayal of how predators rationalize their actions and how victims must psychologically adapt to survive. Off-Season by Jack Ketchum, published in 1980, depicts a family of feral cannibals who systematically hunt and consume a group of vacationers in coastal Maine. This darkest and forbidden book follows Carla and her friends as they become prey for an inbred clan that views humans as nothing more than food sources. Ketchum presents graphic scenes of torture, dismemberment, and cannibalism with clinical detail, showing how the family operates as efficient predators who waste no part of their human victims. The book includes disturbing scenes involving children both as victims and perpetrators of violence, creating a world where civilized behavior has completely collapsed. Several countries have restricted this darkest and forbidden book due to its extreme violence and graphic depictions of cannibalism, with some retailers refusing to stock it alongside other extreme horror titles. The book's horror emerges from its suggestion that humanity's veneer of civilization is incredibly thin, and that savage behavior lurks just beneath the surface. The Wasp Factory, by Ian Banks, published in 1984, follows 16-year-old Frank Cawdhuhame, a disturbed teenager who has murdered 3 children and lives in complete isolation with his secretive father on a Scottish island. This darkest and forbidden book presents Frank's ritualistic behavior, including his creation of elaborate torture devices for insects and his belief that killing wasps can predict future events. Banks reveals Frank's murders gradually, showing how he killed his younger brother, cousin, and a local child through increasingly creative methods involving explosives and traps. The book explores themes of gender identity, psychological abuse, and the construction of violent masculinity through Frank's twisted worldview. While not formally banned, this darkest and forbidden book has faced challenges in several school districts due to its graphic violence against children and animals, disturbing sexual content, and psychological themes. The horror lies in Banks's clinical presentation of child murder and his exploration of how isolation and abuse can create monsters. The Girls, by Emma Cline, published in 2016, explores how a lonely 14-year-old girl named Evie becomes involved with a Manson family-inspired cult that commits brutal murders. This darkest and forbidden book presents the gradual seduction of a vulnerable teenager who joins the group not for ideological reasons, but for acceptance and attention from the charismatic leader, Russell. Cline depicts how Evie witnesses and becomes complicit in acts of violence, sexual abuse, and psychological manipulation, while remaining focused on her infatuation with one of the older girls. The book includes disturbing scenes of group sexual activity involving minors, ritualistic violence, and the systematic grooming of young women for exploitation. While not formally banned, this darkest and forbidden book has faced challenges in several school libraries due to its explicit sexual content involving teenagers and its graphic depiction of cult violence. The horror emerges from Cline's realistic portrayal of how ordinary adolescent desires for belonging can lead to participation in monstrous acts. Requiem for a Dream, by Hubert Selby Jr., published in 1974, follows 4 characters whose pursuit of their dreams leads to devastating drug addiction and complete psychological collapse. This darkest and forbidden book depicts Sarah's descent into amphetamine psychosis as she desperately tries to lose weight for a television appearance that will never come, while her son Harry and his girlfriend Marion spiral into heroin addiction and prostitution. Selby presents graphic scenes of physical deterioration, sexual degradation, and medical horror, including Harry's gangrenous arm infection and Marion's forced participation in sexual performances for drugs. The book culminates with each character reaching their lowest possible point, including electroshock therapy, amputation, and complete psychological breakdown. This darkest and forbidden book has been challenged in multiple school districts for its graphic drug use, explicit sexual content, and disturbing medical procedures. The horror lies in Selby's unflinching portrayal of how addiction destroys not just individuals, but their capacity for hope itself. Tampa, by Alyssa Nutting, published in 2013, follows Celeste Price, a sexually predatory 8th-grade teacher who systematically grooms and abuses her male students while maintaining her position through manipulation and careful planning. This darkest and forbidden book presents Celeste's calculated pursuit of underage boys, her elaborate schemes to avoid detection, and her complete lack of remorse for the psychological damage she inflicts. Nutting depicts explicit scenes of teacher-student sexual abuse, while exploring how female predators operate differently from their male counterparts, using societal assumptions about women to avoid suspicion. The book shows Celeste's marriage as a convenient cover for her crimes, and her willingness to destroy anyone who threatens to expose her behavior. Several school districts have banned this darkest and forbidden book due to its graphic depiction of child sexual abuse and its controversial portrayal of female predation. The horror emerges from Nutting's clinical examination of how predators exploit power dynamics and societal blind spots to continue their abuse. Hog, by Samuel R. Delany, written in 1973 but not published until 1995, follows an 11-year-old boy who becomes involved with Hog, a violent criminal who commits rape, murder, and other brutal acts while the child serves as his unwilling accomplice and witness. This darkest and forbidden book depicts graphic scenes of sexual violence against children, gang rape, torture, and murder, presented through the perspective of a child narrator who doesn't fully understand the horrors he's experiencing. Delany's work explores themes of power, violence, and sexual exploitation, while featuring some of the most disturbing content ever published in American literature. The book remained unpublished for over 20 years due to its extreme content, with multiple publishers refusing to release it despite Delany's reputation as an acclaimed science fiction writer. This darkest and forbidden book has faced widespread censorship and continues to be restricted by many retailers and libraries due to its graphic depiction of child sexual abuse and extreme violence. The horror emerges from Delany's unflinching portrayal of how children can be systematically exploited and traumatized by adults who view them as disposable objects. The End of Alice, by A.M. Holmes, published in 1996, presents the correspondence between an imprisoned pedophile serving time for murdering a young girl and a teenage girl who seeks his advice about seducing a younger boy. This darkest and forbidden book alternates between the narrator's memories of his crimes, including the rape and murder of 12-year-old Alice, and his encouragement of the teenage correspondent's predatory plans. Holmes depicts graphic scenes of child sexual abuse, torture, and murder, while exploring how predators rationalize their actions and seek to create new victims. The book includes disturbing descriptions of the narrator's manipulation tactics and his detailed fantasies about children, presented through his own twisted perspective as he attempts to justify his crimes. Multiple school districts and libraries have banned this darkest and forbidden book due to its explicit depiction of pedophilia and child murder, with many critics arguing it provides a handbook for predatory behavior. The horror lies in Holmes's clinical examination of predatory psychology and her suggestion that such individuals actively work to corrupt others and perpetuate cycles of abuse. In The Miso Soup, by Ryu Murakami, published in 1997, follows Kenji, a young Japanese man who works as a guide for foreign tourists seeking Tokyo's red light district, when he encounters Frank, an American whose behavior becomes increasingly disturbing and violent. This darkest and forbidden book depicts Frank's transformation from an eccentric tourist into a sadistic killer who commits brutal murders in front of Kenji, trapping him as an unwilling witness to escalating atrocities. Murakami presents graphic scenes of sexual violence, dismemberment, and torture while exploring themes of cultural alienation and the dark underbelly of Japan's sex industry. The book includes disturbing sequences involving the mutilation of sex workers and Frank's casual disposal of human bodies as if they were waste products. While not formally banned, this darkest and forbidden book has faced distribution restrictions in several countries due to its extreme violence against women and its graphic sexual content. The horror lies in Murakami's suggestion that violence can erupt suddenly from seemingly normal situations, and that ordinary people can become complicit in evil through circumstance and fear. The 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade, written in 1785 and published in 1904, stands as perhaps the most extreme work in literary history, making it too dangerous to read for most audiences. The book depicts four wealthy French libertines who lock themselves in a remote castle with accomplices and victims to carry out 120 days of escalating sexual violence, torture, and murder. Sade describes in meticulous detail every form of sexual depravity, sadism, and cruelty imaginable, including acts involving children, torture, necrophilia, and cannibalism. The systematic nature of the violence, presented as entertainment for the wealthy perpetrators, creates a work so disturbing it defies summary. This book was deemed too dangerous to read and faced immediate bans in France, the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia that lasted until the 1960s. As recently as 2013, South Korea banned the book for triggering violent excitement before lifting the ban 1 month later after reviewing its literary value. The book remains suppressed in several countries today due to its extreme content. Blood Meridian, by Cormac McCarthy, published in 1985, depicts the extreme violence of 19th-century American frontier life through the story of a teenage runaway who joins a gang of scalp hunters led by the mysterious and terrifying Judge Holden. This book is considered too dangerous to read due to McCarthy's unflinching portrayal of human brutality, featuring graphic scenes of scalping, rape, infanticide, and mass murder presented without moral commentary or redemption. The gang systematically slaughters Native Americans, Mexicans, and anyone they encounter, while Judge Holden philosophizes about violence as the ultimate expression of human will. McCarthy's sparse, biblical prose style makes the extreme violence feel both inevitable and meaningless, creating a nihilistic vision of humanity that many find too dangerous to read. While not formally banned, the book has been challenged in multiple school districts due to its graphic violence and disturbing themes. Several educational institutions have deemed it too dangerous to read for younger audiences due to its relentless brutality and philosophical justification of violence. The book's suggestion that violence is humanity's true nature and that civilization is merely a temporary facade makes it too dangerous to read for those seeking hope or meaning in literature. Tender is the Flesh, by Agustina Bazterrica, published in 2017, presents a world where a virus has made all animal meat deadly to consume, forcing humanity to turn to cannibalism for protein, making it too dangerous to read due to its systematic normalization of human consumption. The book follows Marcos, who works at a processing plant where humans are raised, slaughtered, and packaged like livestock in a society that has completely accepted this practice. Bazterrica depicts graphic scenes of human butchery, breeding programs, and meat processing, while exploring how quickly societies can adapt to previously unthinkable practices when survival is at stake. The book presents cannibalism not as aberrant behavior, but as regulated industry, making it too dangerous to read for its disturbing implications about human adaptability and moral flexibility. While not formally banned, several retailers have restricted the book's availability due to its extreme content and graphic descriptions of human slaughter. The book has been deemed too dangerous to read by some critics, who argue it provides detailed descriptions of human processing that could be genuinely disturbing to sensitive readers. The horror lies in Bazterrica's suggestion that humans can rationalize any atrocity when it becomes economically necessary and socially accepted. Lolita, by Vladimir Nabokov, published in 1955, presents the confession of Humbert Humbert, a middle-aged man obsessed with 12-year-old Dolores Hayes, whom he calls Lolita. This book was considered too dangerous to read due to its first-person narration from a pedophile who manipulates his way into becoming Dolores's stepfather, then sexually abuses her while presenting his actions as a love story. Nabokov's elegant prose creates a disturbing contrast with the horrific subject matter, as Humbert attempts to seduce readers into sympathizing with his perspective. The book faced bans in France for 2 years, England for 4 years, and was prohibited in Argentina, New Zealand, and South Africa for obscenity. Even in the United States, publishers initially refused to print it, considering it too dangerous to read due to its explicit depiction of child sexual abuse disguised as romantic obsession. The horror lies in Nabokov's demonstration of how manipulative language can be used to normalize predatory behavior and reframe abuse as affection. The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie, published in 1988, became too dangerous to read due to its fictional reimagining of Islamic history that many Muslims found deeply offensive. The book includes dream sequences featuring a character resembling the Prophet Muhammad who adds verses to the Quran acknowledging pagan goddesses, later claiming these verses came from the devil. Rushdie's magical realist exploration of faith, doubt, and cultural identity sparked immediate global outrage. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a fatwa calling for Rushdie's execution, making the book literally too dangerous to read in many parts of the world. The book was banned in at least 20 countries, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sudan, and South Africa. Bookstores were firebombed, translators were attacked and killed, and Rushdie himself lived in hiding under police protection for years. In 2022, Rushdie survived a stabbing attack in New York, proving the book remains too dangerous to read for its author decades after publication. American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, published in 1991, follows Patrick Bateman, a wealthy Manhattan investment banker who moonlights as a serial killer, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic depictions of torture, sexual violence, and cannibalism. The book presents Bateman's murders with clinical detail while he discusses designer brands and consumer products, creating a disturbing commentary on 1980s materialism. Ellis describes scenes of prolonged torture involving power tools, sexual mutilation, and cannibalism that several countries deemed too dangerous to read for public consumption. The book faced widespread bans throughout the 1990s, with feminist groups condemning its graphic violence against women. Several countries, including Australia, initially banned its publication entirely, while major bookstore chains in the United States refused to stock it, considering it too dangerous to read due to its extreme content. The book was also banned in Germany for several years and faced restrictions in Canada and New Zealand. Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs, published in 1959, presents a chaotic narrative following drug addict William Lee through surreal scenarios involving grotesque medical experiments and sexual violence, making it too dangerous to read in multiple jurisdictions. The book features disturbing imagery of bodily decay, unethical medical practices, and graphic, intimate acts presented through hallucinogenic prose that defies conventional narrative structure. Burroughs created scenes so disturbing and abstract that authorities considered the work too dangerous to read for its potential to corrupt public morals. The book was banned in Boston, Los Angeles, Australia, and Canada due to its explicit content and profane tone. In the United States, Burroughs faced multiple obscenity trials as prosecutors argued the work was too dangerous to read without artistic merit. Australia banned it for its portrayals of homosexuality and drug use, while Canadian authorities deemed it too dangerous to read due to its graphic sexual content and promotion of illegal substances. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, published in 1932, depicts a dystopian future where humans are mass-produced and controlled through drugs and conditioning, making it too dangerous to read for its subversive political themes. The book presents a world where traditional family structures, religion, and individual freedom have been eliminated in favor of state control and artificial happiness through soma, a mood-altering drug. Huxley's critique of technology, consumerism, and government control was considered too dangerous to read by authorities who feared its influence on public opinion. The book was banned in Ireland in 1932 for its explicit themes and rejection of religion and family values. Australia banned it from 1932 to 1937, while India banned it in 1967, claiming Huxley was promoting inappropriate adult themes. In the United States, the book has faced constant challenges over the years for its language, nudity, and themes that some considered too dangerous to read in schools. 1984, by George Orwell, published in 1949, presents a totalitarian society where Big Brother controls every aspect of human life through surveillance, propaganda, and thought manipulation, making it too dangerous to read for authoritarian governments. The book follows Winston Smith as he lives under constant observation, works rewriting history for the Ministry of Truth, and eventually rebels against the system only to be completely broken through torture. Orwell's depiction of government surveillance, historical revisionism, and psychological control was considered too dangerous to read by multiple communist nations who recognized it as criticism of their political systems. The Soviet Union banned the book in 1950 because Stalin identified it as an attack on his regime. The book was also banned in Vietnam for its political content and remains prohibited in some authoritarian states today. China has restricted access to the book during various periods, considering Orwell's warnings about government control too dangerous to read for citizens living under similar surveillance systems. The Anarchist Cookbook by William Powell, published in 1971, provides detailed instructions for making explosives, dangerous gases, and improvised weapons, making it too dangerous to read due to its potential for enabling terrorist activities. The book includes step-by-step guides for creating bombs, conducting surveillance, and carrying out acts of sabotage, written in a tone promoting violence as resistance against authority. Powell created the manual as a reaction to political unrest, but many of the instructions are poorly researched and dangerously flawed, making it too dangerous to read even for those with technical knowledge. The book has been linked to numerous terrorist attacks, including bombings by Puerto Rican separatists, abortion clinic attacks, and the 2005 London transit bombings. Australia and Canada have banned the book entirely, while the United Kingdom considers possession of the book criminal due to its usefulness for terrorism. In the United States, while legal to own, the book may be seized if connected to suspected criminal activity, and authorities consider it too dangerous to read without proper context and supervision. Animal Farm by George Orwell, published in 1945, tells the story of farm animals who overthrow their human owner only to find themselves under a new form of oppression, making it too dangerous to read for its pointed criticism of political systems. The book presents the pigs' gradual transformation into the same type of oppressors they originally fought against, with the famous line, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others," serving as a direct critique of revolutionary hypocrisy. Communist governments considered Orwell's allegory too dangerous to read because it exposed the failures of socialist leadership and the corruption of revolutionary ideals. The Soviet Union banned the book immediately upon publication, along with other communist nations like Czechoslovakia in 1948 and Vietnam for promoting false socialist ideology. Cuba continues to ban the book today, while the United Arab Emirates removed it from schools in 2002 due to Islamic sensitivities about the portrayal of pigs and alcohol. Even in Western countries, the book was temporarily considered too dangerous to read during World War II, when Britain didn't want to upset their Soviet allies. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, by Lewis Carroll, published in 1865, faced bans despite being a children's story, due to concerns about its surreal content and perceived hidden meanings, making it too dangerous to read in certain contexts. The book follows Alice as she falls down a rabbit hole and encounters strange creatures including a caterpillar who smokes a hookah and gives her size-changing mushrooms. In the United States during the 1960s, some schools banned the book for supposedly promoting drug culture and disrespecting authority figures, considering Carroll's fantasy world too dangerous to read during the counterculture movement. China banned it in Hunan province in 1931 because officials believed giving animals human characteristics was insulting and potentially confusing for children, making the book too dangerous to read for its supposed undermining of natural hierarchies. The Soviet Union also banned it for perceived political subversion, viewing Alice's absurd adventures and questioning of authority as too dangerous to read in a controlled society.
The Road by Cormac McCarthy, published in 2006, follows a father and son walking through a post-apocalyptic wasteland where cannibalism is common and civilization has completely collapsed. They push a shopping cart containing their few possessions down empty highways, avoiding roving gangs of survivors who hunt humans for food. The father is slowly dying from a lung disease, coughing up blood while trying to protect his son. Throughout their journey, the father repeatedly tells the boy they are carrying the fire, meaning they're still good people in a world gone evil. The boy asks his father what will happen when he dies. Near the end, the father's condition worsens. He can barely walk. They reach a beach where he finally collapses, knowing death is imminent. The father tells his son to keep going south, to find the good guys, and to keep carrying the fire. After the father dies, the boy sits with the body for 3 days, talking to his dead father and refusing to leave. A stranger approaches and tells the boy he's been watching them. The man claims to have a family and says the boy can come with them. The boy asks if the man is carrying the fire too. The man says yes. The boy goes with him, but McCarthy never confirms whether this stranger is actually good or if the boy just walked into the hands of cannibals. The ending suggests the boy might have just traded one form of death for another. We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, published in 2003, is told through letters from Eva to her husband Franklin about their son Kevin, who committed a mass shooting at his high school. The entire story is Eva's attempt to understand how their child became a killer. From birth, Kevin showed disturbing behavior. He refused to be toilet trained until age 6, deliberately soiled himself, and seemed to take pleasure in making Eva miserable. As a toddler, he threw his food and screamed for hours. Eva admits she never bonded with Kevin and sometimes felt hatred toward him. Kevin seemed to sense this and deliberately made her life hell. When Kevin was 6, Eva lost her temper and threw him against a wall, breaking his arm. Instead of crying or telling anyone, Kevin smiled. He had finally gotten the reaction he wanted. Throughout his childhood, Kevin tortured his younger sister Celia, blinded her in one eye, and psychologically manipulated Franklin into believing Eva was the problem parent. The mass shooting happens when Kevin is 15. He kills 9 people at his school using a bicycle lock, crossbow, and other weapons. The ending reveals that 3 days before the shooting, Kevin murdered Franklin and Celia at home. Eva had been writing letters to a dead husband for 2 years, talking to no one. She visits Kevin in prison, where he finally admits he doesn't know why he did it. Eva realizes she's been clinging to the hope that there was a reason, something that made sense. Kevin's confession that it was meaningless destroys her last attempt to understand. She decides to take Kevin back home when he's released. Not out of love, but because they're the only family each other has left. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, published in 1985, takes place in the Republic of Gilead, a totalitarian society where fertile women called handmaids are forced to bear children for wealthy couples. The narrator, Offred, lives with the commander and his wife, Serena Joy. Every month, Offred participates in a ceremony where the commander attempts to impregnate her while she lies between Serena Joy's legs. Offred begins secretly meeting with the commander for games of Scrabble and conversations, which are forbidden. She also starts a sexual relationship with Nick, the household's chauffeur. Throughout the story, Offred remembers her life before Gilead, when she had a husband named Luke and a daughter. She doesn't know if they're alive or dead. The government of Gilead separated families and sent people to different locations or executed them. Near the end, Offred discovers she might be pregnant, but doesn't know if the father is the commander or Nick. Serena Joy finds out about Offred's secret meetings with the commander and threatens to have her sent to the colonies, a place where unwomen clean up toxic waste until they die. Nick tells Offred that members of the resistance are coming to rescue her. Men arrive in a van claiming to be from the resistance. Offred must decide whether to trust them or stay. Nick encourages her to go. As Offred steps into the van, she doesn't know if she's being rescued or arrested. The story ends with her entering the van, unsure if she's walking toward freedom or execution. Atwood provides no resolution about Offred's fate, her baby, or whether she ever finds her family. The Giver by Lois Lowry, published in 1993, depicts a society where all pain, emotion, and color have been eliminated through strict control and daily drug injections. Jonas lives in this community where jobs are assigned, families are created artificially, and no one experiences real feelings. When Jonas turns 12, he's selected to become the receiver of memory, the person who holds all the memories of the world before their society existed. The current receiver, now called the Giver, transfers memories to Jonas through touch. Jonas experiences color for the first time, then pain, war, starvation, and love. He learns that his society maintains peace by killing anyone who doesn't conform. When babies cry too much or elderly people reach a certain age, they're released, which Jonas discovers means lethal injection. Jonas learns that his father, a caretaker, regularly kills babies as part of his job. Jonas also discovers that the baby his family is temporarily caring for, Gabriel, is scheduled for release because he cries at night. Jonas and the Giver plan an escape. If Jonas leaves the community and crosses the boundary, all the memories he carries will return to the people, forcing them to feel again. Jonas steals Gabriel and flees on his father's bicycle. He stops taking the emotion-suppressing pills and begins to feel everything. As he travels, Jonas runs out of food and Gabriel grows weak. Jonas begins to starve and freeze in the wilderness. In the final scene, Jonas thinks he hears music and sees lights ahead. He sleds down a hill toward what he believes is a house with a family celebrating. However, Lowry deliberately wrote the ending to be ambiguous. Jonas might be reaching safety and freedom, or he might be dying of hypothermia and hallucinating his final moments. The music could be real or could be his brain shutting down as he freezes to death. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, published in 2005, follows Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy, who grow up together at Hailsham, a boarding school in England. The students are told they're special, but they don't learn why until they're teenagers. They discover they're clones, created specifically to provide organs for their original. Their entire purpose is to grow up healthy, then donate their organs until they die. The process is called completing. Students typically survive 3 or 4 donations before completing. After leaving Hailsham, the clones become carers who look after donors, then eventually become donors themselves. Kathy works as a carer for years, helping her former classmates through their donations. Ruth becomes a donor and completes after her 3rd donation. Tommy also becomes a donor. Before he completes, Kathy and Tommy investigate a rumor that clones who are truly in love can defer their donations for a few years. They track down their former teacher, Miss Emily, who explains that the rumor is false. She reveals that Hailsham was actually a progressive institution that tried to prove clones had souls by encouraging them to create art and poetry. However, society didn't care. The program was shut down because people preferred not to think about where their medical miracles came from. Miss Emily tells them that all clones face the same fate regardless of their feelings or humanity. Tommy undergoes his 4th donation and completes. Kathy continues working as a carer, knowing that soon she'll receive her first donation notice. The story ends with Kathy driving alone, remembering her friends, and waiting for her turn to begin donating. She accepts her fate completely, never trying to escape or rebel. Ishiguro reveals that even when people know they're being killed systematically, they often accept it rather than fight. The Lottery, by Shirley Jackson, published in 1948, takes place in a small American town on June 27 during the annual lottery tradition. The story begins as villagers gather in the town square for what appears to be a pleasant community event. Children collect stones and put them in piles. Adults chat about everyday concerns like crops and weather. The lottery is conducted by Mr. Summers, who brings out a black wooden box filled with paper slips. Every family in the town must participate. The head of each household draws a slip of paper from the box. Most slips are blank, but one contains a black dot. Bill Hutchinson draws the marked paper, meaning his family has been selected. Now each member of the Hutchinson family must draw from the box again. This includes Bill, his wife Tessie, and their 3 children. Tessie protests that the process wasn't fair, that Bill didn't have enough time to select his paper properly. The other villagers ignore her complaints. During the second drawing, Tessie draws the slip with the black dot. Mr. Summers instructs everyone to finish quickly. The villagers, including Tessie's own family members, pick up the stones that the children gathered earlier. Tessie backs away, screaming that the lottery isn't fair. The townspeople surround her and begin throwing stones. Even little children participate in the stoning. Mrs. Delacroix, who had been chatting friendly with Tessie moments earlier, selects a stone so large she can barely lift it. The story ends with Tessie being stoned to death by her neighbors, friends, and family members. Jackson reveals that this community maintains its tradition of human sacrifice through a random selection process, and everyone participates willingly because it's always been done this way. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, published in 1966, follows Charlie Gordon, a mentally disabled man who works as a janitor and desperately wants to become smarter. Charlie volunteers for an experimental surgery that has successfully increased the intelligence of a laboratory mouse named Algernon. The story is told through Charlie's progress reports, which initially contain basic spelling and grammar errors. After the surgery, Charlie's intelligence increases rapidly. His writing becomes more sophisticated. He learns multiple languages, understands complex scientific theories, and realizes that his co-workers at the bakery weren't being friendly to him before the surgery. They were mocking him. Charlie becomes a genius, surpassing even the scientists who performed his operation. He falls in love with his former teacher, Alice Kinnigan, and experiences emotions and desires he never had before. However, Charlie notices that Algernon begins showing signs of aggression and memory loss. The mouse's behavior becomes erratic. Charlie studies Algernon's condition and discovers a fatal flaw in the experimental procedure. The intelligence increase is temporary. Algernon dies after his intelligence deteriorates completely. Charlie realizes the same thing will happen to him. As his intelligence begins to decline, Charlie experiences the horror of losing everything he gained. His memories fade. His ability to read disappears. His understanding of love and relationships slips away. He becomes aware that he's forgetting things but can't stop the process. In his final progress report, Charlie's writing returns to its original simple, error-filled style. He asks that someone put flowers on Algernon's grave. Charlie returns to his job at the bakery, but his coworkers now treat him differently because they remember when he was a genius. Charlie decides to move away, where no one knows his story. The ending reveals that Charlie experienced the fullness of human intelligence and love, only to have it stripped away while remaining conscious of what he was losing. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, published in 2012, alternates between the perspectives of Nick and Amy Dunn, a married couple whose relationship is falling apart. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Amy disappears from their home in Missouri. Evidence suggests she was abducted or murdered. Nick becomes the prime suspect because he's having an affair and shows inappropriate behavior during press conferences. The first half of the story presents Nick as potentially guilty through Amy's diary entries, which describe an increasingly abusive marriage. However, the middle of the book reveals that Amy is alive and has orchestrated her own disappearance to frame Nick for her murder. Amy's diary entries were fabricated. She planned every detail for over a year, including faking a pregnancy and collecting Nick's semen to plant evidence. Amy explains that she discovered Nick's affair and decided to punish him by destroying his life, then killing herself so he would be executed for her murder. Amy hides in a cabin, disguises her appearance, and watches the media coverage of her disappearance. However, her plan begins falling apart when other people at the cabin steal her money. Amy contacts her wealthy ex-boyfriend Desi, claiming Nick abused her and she needs help. She stays at Desi's house for weeks while planning her next move. When Amy realizes that public opinion is shifting in Nick's favor, she murders Desi by slitting his throat during sex, then claims he kidnapped and raped her. Amy returns home as a hero. Nick knows she killed Desi and framed him, but he can't prove it. Amy announces she's pregnant with Nick's child, using the semen she collected. She tells Nick that if he tries to leave her or expose her, she'll destroy his life and raise their child to hate him. Nick realizes he's trapped in marriage with a psychopath who has legally bound him to her through the child. The story ends with Nick staying in the marriage, knowing that Amy will likely kill him eventually, but unable to escape without losing access to his child and facing potential murder charges himself.
Cows by Matthew Stokoe, published in 1998, stands as perhaps the most notorious work in extreme horror literature. The book follows Stephen, a young man seeking power and autonomy in a nightmarish world of exploitation and cruelty. Set in an industrial wasteland, Stephen works at a slaughterhouse where daily violence against animals mirrors the human brutality around him. The horror in Cows stems from its relentless assault on every possible taboo, featuring graphic bestiality, cannibalism, necrophilia, and consumption of human waste. Stokoe creates scenes so creatively heinous that readers frequently abandon the book due to physical revulsion. The horror lies not just in individual acts, but in the complete absence of humanity or hope. Despite widespread reader disgust and retailer refusal to stock it, Cows has never been formally banned, though it remains one of the most difficult books to finish in the genre. The Slob, by Aaron Beauregard, published in 2021, depicts what happens when Vera accepts an invitation to visit a man's house, unaware he's a sadistic killer and hoarder living in absolute squalor. The titular character exists surrounded by rotting food, human remains, and mountains of filth. The horror escalates when Vera becomes trapped and subjected to prolonged torture, sexual violence, and forced consumption of bodily waste and fetal matter. Beauregard's work pushes extreme horror to its absolute limits, with scenes involving pregnancy-related violence and graphic mutilation that defies description. The horror emerges from the complete dehumanization of victims and the celebration of degradation as entertainment. While not officially banned, the book faces widespread criticism for crossing into exploitative territory rather than meaningful horror fiction. Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison, published in 2011, follows a hospital security guard obsessed with necrophilia, who meets a doctor with cannibalistic tendencies toward infants. The protagonist repeatedly declares his attraction to corpses, while the female lead consumes newborn babies. The horror emerges from Morrison's clinical, detached description of these acts, treating them as mundane preferences rather than horrific crimes. The book intentionally reads like satirical edgelord fiction, with characters spouting pretentious dialogue while committing unspeakable acts. The disturbing horror comes from its matter-of-fact presentation of necrophilia and infanticide as romantic bonding activities. Morrison creates horror through the normalization of the absolutely abnormal. Splatterpunks, by Paul M. Salmon, published in 1990, compiles the most extreme works from the splatterpunk movement, including stories that push horror into previously unexplored territories of violence and sexual degradation. The book features tales of surgical horror, ritual dismemberment, and psychological torture that influence the entire extreme horror genre. Individual stories within the collection describe scenarios involving live autopsy, sexual violence combined with body modification, and detailed accounts of human vivisection. The horror emerges from the anthology's celebration of graphic violence as artistic expression, with each story attempting to outdo the previous in terms of shocking content. The book faced distribution challenges due to its extreme content, with several major bookstore chains refusing to carry it during the height of the moral panic surrounding violent literature in the early 1990s. Grandpappy, by Patrick C. Harrison III, published in 2020, tells a surreal story about a grandfather and grandson bonding through increasingly violent and drug-fueled activities. The book follows the narrator as his grandfather introduces him to a world of sexual violence, substance abuse, and murder presented as family traditions. The horror lies in the complete normalization of extreme taboo behavior within a family structure, with scenes involving torn membranes, ritualistic violence, and multi-generational abuse. Harrison writes in a deliberately flat, teenage style that contrasts sharply with the diabolical acts being described. The horror emerges from the disconnect between the casual narration and the horrific events, creating an unsettling atmosphere where extreme violence becomes mundane family bonding. The book's surreal nature makes the horror feel both absurd and deeply disturbing. Womb, by Duncan Ralston, published in 2019, follows a traumatized man who rents a room with a sex worker for a night that devolves into violence and revelation. The book centers on characters harboring dark secrets involving sexual trauma, bodily mutilation, and psychological abuse. The horror builds through the gradual revelation of each character's hidden damage, with scenes involving self-harm, sexual violence, and graphic descriptions of physical deterioration. Ralston creates horror through the exploration of trauma's lasting effects, showing how damaged people can damage others. The book's horror lies in its realistic portrayal of human brokenness and the ways trauma perpetuates itself through violence. Despite its extreme content, the book maintains focus on character psychology rather than spectacle. Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright, published in 1996, follows two serial killers who meet in New Orleans and fall in love while continuing their murderous activities. The book details graphic scenes of sexual violence, cannibalism, and torture as expressions of twisted romance. Andrew Compton and Jay Burns engage in ritualistic killing that they present as artistic and sexual expression. The horror emerges from Bright's beautiful prose describing horrific acts, creating a disturbing contrast between elegant language and brutal content. The book explores themes of homosexuality, AIDS, and death, while featuring detailed descriptions of corpse mutilation and necrophilia. The horror lies in the romanticization of murder and the suggestion that love and violence can become indistinguishable. Reincarnage by Ryan Harding and Jason Taverner, published in 2018, drops a group of people into the domain of a sadistic, immortal killer, resembling classic slasher villains like Jason Voorhees. The book functions as a slasher story in written form, with characters being systematically hunted and killed in creative, spectacular ways. The horror emerges from the relentless violence and the revelation that the characters are trapped in an endless cycle of death and resurrection, forced to experience brutal murder repeatedly. Harding and Taverner focus on graphic descriptions of dismemberment, torture, and creative killing methods, while hinting at government corruption and post-war trauma themes. The book's horror lies in its exploration of meaningless violence and the psychological torment of knowing death is inevitable but temporary. The characters must endure being killed over and over again, creating a hell of perpetual suffering. 100% Match by Patrick C. Harrison III, published in 2019, follows Bart, a fast food worker and occasional sadist, searching for his perfect romantic match through dating apps. The book presents Bart's pathetic quest for love while he commits random acts of violence and taboo behavior that he mentions casually before moving on. The horror emerges from Bart's complete disconnect from reality and his inability to understand why his criminal actions make him unsuitable for relationships. Harrison creates disturbing comedy through Bart's delusional self-perception and his bizarre dating statistics and romantic theories. The book's horror lies in its portrayal of a dangerous person who believes he's normal and deserving of love while committing increasingly serious crimes. The flat, understated presentation of violent acts makes them more unsettling than graphic descriptions would. Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana, published in 2019, follows Lori and her sister as they travel down a river searching for the mythical Riverman, a dark entity who might grant wishes in exchange for confronting one's deepest secrets. The book blends Southern Gothic atmosphere with psychological horror as the characters encounter increasingly disturbing situations along their journey. The horror builds through the gradual revelation of family trauma, sexual abuse, and the character's own capacity for evil. Triana creates an oppressive atmosphere where hope itself becomes corrupting and the pursuit of redemption leads to damnation. The book's horror emerges from its mean-spirited worldview and its suggestion that humans are fundamentally selfish and evil. The ending proves that the character's quest was always doomed and that their belief in salvation was merely another delusion. American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, published in 1991, follows Patrick Bateman, a wealthy investment banker in 1980s Manhattan who moonlights as a serial killer. The book presents Bateman's daily routine of designer clothing, expensive restaurants, and brutal murders with equal attention to detail. Ellis describes torture, sexual violence, and cannibalism with clinical precision, while Bateman discusses brand names and consumer products. The horror emerges from the juxtaposition of extreme violence with materialistic obsessions, suggesting that consumer culture and psychopathy are intimately connected. Bateman's victims include homeless people, sex workers, and random strangers, whom he subjects to prolonged torture involving power tools, acid, and sexual mutilation. The book faced widespread bans and challenges throughout the 1990s, with feminist groups condemning its graphic depictions of violence against women. Several countries banned its publication entirely, while major bookstore chains initially refused to stock it. The horror lies not just in the graphic violence, but in Ellis's suggestion that Bateman's behavior reflects broader societal sickness. The Girl Next Door, by Jack Ketchum, published in 1989, tells the story of Meg and Susan Laughlin, two sisters who are sent to live with their Aunt Ruth after their parents die in a car accident. Based on the real-life torture and murder of Sylvia Likens in 1965, the book follows Ruth as she systematically abuses and tortures Meg while encouraging neighborhood children to participate. The horror builds as Ruth convinces the children that Meg deserves punishment for imaginary crimes, turning the basement into a torture chamber where sexual abuse, burning, and mutilation occur daily. Ketchum presents the story through the perspective of David, a neighborhood boy who witnesses the abuse but fails to stop it. The book's horror emerges from its realistic portrayal of how ordinary people can become complicit in evil, and how authority figures can manipulate children into committing atrocities. The systematic nature of the abuse and the community's participation in Meg's suffering creates a devastating portrait of human cruelty. The book has been challenged in libraries and schools for its graphic content and disturbing themes, with critics arguing it exploits real tragedy for entertainment. The Summer I Died by Ryan C. Thomas, published in 2006, tells the story of two best friends captured by a deranged mountain man who subjects them to torture and psychological torment. The book focuses on the friendship between Roger and Tooth as they struggle to survive their captor's increasingly violent games. The horror emerges from the realistic portrayal of friendship under extreme stress and the detailed descriptions of physical and psychological torture. Thomas creates genuine dread by making readers care about the characters before subjecting them to brutal violence. The book's horror lies in its exploration of how trauma destroys innocence and changes people permanently. Unlike many extreme horror works, the violence feels heavy and meaningful, rather than exploitative, making the horror more emotionally devastating. Shadows from the Walls of Death, by Robert Clark Kedzie, published in 1874, stands as the only book that will literally kill you through physical contact. This book contains 86 actual samples of arsenic-pigmented wallpaper that were commonly used in Victorian homes, making it too dangerous to read without protective equipment. Kedzie created this educational work to warn the public about deadly wallpapers that contained up to 36 grams of arsenic across all samples. This book will kill you through arsenic poisoning if you handle the pages without protection, as the toxic dust can be inhaled or absorbed through skin contact. Of the original 100 copies printed, only 4 survive today, because libraries destroyed the rest due to their lethal toxicity. The surviving copies are sealed in protective containers and kept away from public access. This book will kill you more efficiently than any fictional horror story, because the arsenic content remains deadly over 150 years after publication. Libraries that still house copies require special handling protocols and warn that prolonged exposure could cause chronic arsenic poisoning organ failure, and death. The King in Yellow, by Robert W. Chambers, published in 1895, features a fictional play within the story that drives readers to madness, suicide, and self-destruction, making it too dangerous to read even in its fictional context. The book presents the idea that certain knowledge is so corrupting that exposure to it destroys human sanity completely. Within Chambers' stories, this book will kill you through psychological devastation, causing readers to lose their minds, harm themselves, or take their own lives after reading just the first act. The fictional play is banned throughout the imaginary world Chambers created, because authorities recognize that this book will kill you through mental collapse rather than physical violence. While the real book by Chambers is not banned, it explores themes of forbidden knowledge and cosmic horror that influence later writers like H.P. Lovecraft. The horror lies in the suggestion that some information is too dangerous for human minds to process, and that this book will kill you by revealing truths that shatter psychological stability and the ability to function in normal society. 4.48 Psychosis by Sarah Kane, published in 2000, presents the final work of a playwright who took her own life shortly after completing it, making it too dangerous to read for those struggling with mental health issues. The play consists of fragmented thoughts, poetry, and dialogue exploring severe depression, suicidal ideation, and the complete breakdown of psychological stability. Kane wrote the piece while experiencing severe depression and psychosis, creating a work so raw and hopeless that this book will kill you emotionally if you're in a vulnerable mental state. The title refers to 4:48 a.m., the time Kane identified as when depression hits its deepest point and when she felt most suicidal. Mental health professionals have warned that this book will kill you psychologically if read during periods of depression or suicidal thoughts, as it offers no hope or redemption. The work has been pulled from some theatrical productions due to concerns about its impact on audiences dealing with mental health struggles. This book will kill you through its complete absence of hope and its unflinching portrayal of mental illness as an inescapable prison. The Dumb House, by John Burnside, published in 1997, follows a man who conducts horrific psychological experiments on children to discover the origins of human language, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic depiction of child abuse disguised as scientific research. The narrator describes isolating children from all human contact to see what language they would naturally develop, subjecting them to sensory deprivation, starvation, and psychological torture. This book will kill you emotionally through its clinical description of systematic child abuse presented as intellectual curiosity rather than cruelty. Burnside creates a narrator who shows no remorse for destroying young lives in pursuit of knowledge, making the horror feel coldly rational rather than emotionally driven. While not formally banned, several libraries have restricted access to this book due to its disturbing themes involving child endangerment and psychological torture. This book will kill you through its suggestion that intellectual pursuit can justify any level of cruelty, and that scientific curiosity can become monstrous when unchecked by human empathy. Lapvona, by Otessa Moshfegh, published in 2022, depicts a medieval world of extreme poverty, violence, and moral decay, where characters commit acts of cannibalism, infanticide, and sexual violence with casual indifference, making it too dangerous to read for sensitive audiences. The story follows Merrick, a deformed peasant boy whose life becomes entangled with a corrupt lord's family in a village plagued by famine, disease, and cruelty. Moshfegh presents graphic scenes of child abuse, sexual violence, and cannibalism while maintaining a darkly comic tone that makes the horror feel both absurd and deeply disturbing. This book will kill you psychologically through its relentless portrayal of human depravity without offering any redemption or hope for the characters or their world. The book faced content warnings from multiple retailers due to its extreme violence and disturbing sexual content involving minors. This book will kill you through its nihilistic worldview, where every character is either victim or perpetrator, and where survival requires abandoning all moral principles and human decency. Boy Parts, by Eliza Clark, published in 2020, follows Irina, a photographer who sexually exploits and psychologically manipulates working-class men while documenting their humiliation and pain, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic depiction of predatory behavior and sexual violence. Irina uses her camera and social position to lure vulnerable men into situations where she controls and degrades them, taking photographs that capture their exploitation and suffering. Clark presents scenes of sexual coercion, psychological manipulation, and class-based exploitation through Irina's narcissistic perspective, making her predatory behavior feel both realistic and deeply disturbing. This book will kill you emotionally through its unflinching portrayal of how privilege can be weaponized to exploit and destroy vulnerable people. While not formally banned, the book has faced content restrictions on several platforms due to its explicit sexual content and disturbing power dynamics. This book will kill you through its demonstration that predators can be found in any social class, and that art can become a tool for exploitation and abuse. The Secret History, by Donna Tartt, published in 1992, follows a group of elite college students who commit murder and gradually destroy each other through paranoia, guilt, and moral corruption, making it too dangerous to read for its seductive portrayal of intellectual elitism leading to violence. The story begins with the murder of Bunny Corcoran and works backward to show how his classmates planned and executed his death after he discovered their previous killing of a local farmer. Tartt presents the students' descent into murder as the inevitable result of their pursuit of transcendent experience through classical studies and their professors' teachings about moving beyond conventional morality. This book will kill you psychologically through its suggestion that education and privilege can corrupt rather than enlighten, and that intellectual pursuit, divorced from human empathy, leads to monstrous behavior. The book has been challenged in some educational settings for its graphic violence and its potentially harmful message about academic excellence. This book will kill you through its demonstration that the most dangerous people are often those who believe their intelligence and education place them above ordinary moral constraints. The Tender Flesh, by Agustina Bazterrica, published in 2017, presents a dystopian world where humans are bred and slaughtered for meat after animal consumption becomes deadly, making it too dangerous to read due to its systematic normalization of cannibalism and human farming. The book follows Marcos, who works at a processing plant where humans are raised like livestock and slaughtered for consumption in a society that has completely accepted this practice. Bazterrica depicts graphic scenes of human butchery, breeding programs, and meat processing, while exploring how quickly civilized societies can adapt to previously unthinkable practices. This book will kill you psychologically through its clinical presentation of human slaughter as routine industry, showing how economic necessity can override fundamental moral boundaries. The book has faced content restrictions from several retailers due to its disturbing implications and graphic descriptions of human processing. This book will kill you through its suggestion that humans can rationalize any atrocity when survival demands it, and that moral boundaries are far more fragile than we believe. American Rapture, by C.J. Lead, published in 2024, depicts a world ravaged by a sexually transmitted virus that turns infected people into violent, lust-driven creatures, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic combination of sexual violence and apocalyptic horror. The story follows Sophie as she navigates a collapsing society where the virus spreads through sexual contact, turning victims into mindless predators driven only by violent sexual urges. Lead presents disturbing scenes of sexual assault, body horror, and societal breakdown, while exploring themes of religious extremism and sexual repression. This book will kill you emotionally through its relentless portrayal of sexual violence as both symptom and cause of civilizational collapse. The book has faced content warnings and restrictions due to its explicit sexual violence and disturbing religious imagery. This book will kill you through its nihilistic vision of sexuality as a destructive force that inevitably leads to violence, degradation, and the complete breakdown of human society. Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, by Eric LaRocca, published in 2021, presents an epistolary horror story about two women whose online relationship escalates into extreme sadomasochism, self-harm, and psychological destruction, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic depiction of consensual violence and mental deterioration. The story unfolds through emails and text messages as Agnes and Zoe progress from casual conversation to increasingly dangerous acts of self-mutilation and psychological manipulation disguised as romantic intimacy. LaRocca depicts scenes of self-harm, psychological abuse, and extreme body modification, while presenting the escalating violence as expressions of love and devotion. This book will kill you mentally through its portrayal of how toxic relationships can escalate to life-threatening extremes while maintaining the illusion of consent and affection. While not formally banned, the book has faced widespread content warnings due to its extreme depictions of self-harm and psychological manipulation. This book will kill you through its demonstration that love and destruction can become indistinguishable, and that people will inflict incredible damage on themselves and others in pursuit of connection and acceptance. Hog, by Samuel R. Delany, written in 1973, but not published until 1995, follows an 11-year-old boy who becomes the unwilling witness and accomplice to Hog, a violent criminal who commits rape, murder, and extreme sexual violence, making it too dangerous to read due to its graphic depiction of child exploitation and systematic abuse. The story presents horrific scenes of gang rape, torture, and murder through the perspective of a child narrator who doesn't fully comprehend the atrocities he's experiencing, but describes them in disturbing detail. Delany's work explores power dynamics and sexual violence while featuring some of the most extreme content ever published in American literature, including graphic scenes involving children as both victims and witnesses to unspeakable acts. This book will kill you psychologically through its unflinching portrayal of how children can be systematically exploited and traumatized by adults who view them as disposable objects for their violent pleasures. The book remained unpublished for over 20 years because multiple publishers refused to release it despite Delany's reputation as an acclaimed science fiction writer, recognizing that this book will kill you emotionally and potentially trigger severe psychological trauma. Even today, many retailers and libraries restrict access to the book due to its extreme content involving child sexual abuse and graphic violence. This book will kill you through its demonstration that innocence can be destroyed systematically, and that some adults view children as nothing more than tools for their own twisted gratification.